Okay, we'll start today's session. I think I'm audible. Okay. Namassundaranathaya tasmai halasya vasine chatushshti vidhalila yenakari bhuvastale Shrimat Sundaranathasya devim shapharalochanam kalaye hridaye nityam kadamba vanavasinim Putam swataf putataram tatoyat gangam payash shankara mauli sangat tatpatu mataf pranayaparadha padahataihi putatamam tato naha. Last class we finished with this shloka, 19th. Vakroktayaha yatra vibhushanani vakyartha badhaha paramah prakarshaha artheshu bodhyeshu abhidhaiva doshaha sakachid anya saranihi kavina. So the path that is taken by Kavi is completely different. Vilakshana saranihi eva tatra darshita. That is normal people who think that, being straightforward, talking in a direct manner, and where the main meaning is not, if it is not fitting, then it is not accepted by normal people, that it is a good speech. Whereas these become bhushanam in a kavyam. So, yadyat samanya janeshu na prashastha. That sarvam, that everything becomes an adornment or an ornament in the path of a kavi. So vakroktayaha yatra vibhushanani. So vakrokti is indirect expression where you don't directly talk about it, which is a special vibhushanam. And I said where the vakrokti is the I call it adipada, foundation. It is the foundation for kavyam. So it is extremely portrayed as the best way to use or express a kavyam. So saisha sarvatra vakroktihi anaya arthaha vibhavyate. So yatnaha asyam kavina kartavyaha karyaha. A poet should make an extra effort to use vakrokti in his expressions in his kavyam. Because without that indirect expression, if it is direct, then it is just what a laukika vyavahara is all about. So it is better to have an extra effort in making indirect expressions in kavyam. And then where the paramah prakarshaha, mukyartha badaha eva tatra paramah prakarshaha. So the expressed meaning has more speciality, and the direct meaning is completely submerged there, and the suggested meaning has more this thing. Direct expression is actually a fault. Abhidhaiva doshaha. Ya artheshu bodhyeshu abhidayeva doshaha. So direct meaning is never, if whatever the Kavi wants to express, if he just directly says in the shloka, then it is called a dosha. It is much better if it is expressed in dhvani. Then it is left to the Sahridaya to understand it, and he derives joy in that intellectual exercise also. Right? We'll move on to the next shloka. Sadartha matra grahanat pratita sarvajnata sapi shashankamaulehe prapta vikasam pratibha kavinam vyapnoti yadvetti natat shivopi. He shows a subtle difference between Kavi and Ishvara in this. Because the Kavi is the subject matter here. Prakritam, context is here Kavi. So he is talking of the Kavi as much better than Ishvara. Because Ishvara is only, he is called a Sarvajna because he understands or he knows every object that is present in the world. Jagati vidyamananam padarthanam tattvameva saha janati iti karanat tasya sarvajnaha iti nama. Right? So sad artha matra grahanat. Sad artha. Sat is something that exists. So san iti asti. Asti iti sat. So sad artha matra grahanat. Ye arthaha santi. Whatever object is present, those sat artha, those are the objects that exist. Tesham grahanat, because of the understanding of the mere understanding, matram atra, you will take it as something which is, he knows only the true nature of the object. Actually, no, to find out the true nature of the object itself, people spend janmas for it. But here, Kavi, he uses Chatu Ukti and he says, Ishvara is capable of only knowing the Sat Artha, Sad Artha, any object that exists, and its true nature, Tasya Grahanat, Pratita Sarvajnata, Shashanka Maulehe. Shashanka Maulihi is Shiva. Shashanka, Shasha is Mriga or rabbit. Anka is the Chinnam. So in the moon, you find the black spots, and people call it as either a Mriga, a deer, or a Shasha, rabbit. So he is called, hence the moon is called Shashanka athava Mrigankaha. Iti mrigalanchanaha ityapi tasya nama asti. So Shashankaha maulau yasya iti Shashanka maulihi iti Shivasya nama. So Shashanka maulehe sarvajnata api kasmat pratita. How do we know his omniscience? His sarvajnatvam is understood. Pratita sarvajnata. Shashanka maulehe sarvajnata. The all-knowing nature of Shiva is understood. Pratita is known because of sadartha matra grahanat, because of the grahanam, knowledge, because of the knowledge of an object's true nature or knowledge of every existing object. Sadartha athava sadartha vishaya matra grahanam. You can include a vishaya there to understand it much better. Not only he knows the object, he also knows the object really well, because he understands the needs of every object, and he has created this world which satisfies the needs of every little object that is there in the world. From Kitadi Brahma Varyantam, Sarvasyapi, he has created an environment, he has created its food, survival, everything. So Sarvajnata Pratita. Now, where is the Kavi different from this? This seems very great here, right? Atra Kavinam Pratibha Ya Vikasam Prapta Tad Yat Vyapnoti Tat Shivaha Api Na Vetti. Anvayam goes like that. So Vikasam Prapta Kavinam Pratibha. Now, this poet's imagination is so well developed. If the poet's imagination is pratibha here. Pratibha is either imagination or creativity. It's called Navanava Unmesha Shalini Pratibha Ityuktam. It's also the quality with which he can create new things. So Pratibha, that intelligence that a Kavi has, Kavinam Pratibha, and if it has, if it is well developed, Vikasam Prapta, well bloomed, Vikasam Prapta Chet, Sa Pratibha Yat Vyapnoti. Whatever it envelops, Yadyat Vyapya Tishtati, Yat Paryantam Vyapya Tishtati, iti Yat Vyapnoti. Tat, that extent or tad Vyaptim, Shivaha Api na vetti. Even Ishvara cannot understand. Sarvajñopi Ishvaraha. Even though he knows everything, he cannot understand the expanse that a poet's imagination can cover. So yat vyapnoti ityukte yavat paryantam tasya pratibha gantum shaknoti tat sarvamapi sarvajñopi ishvaraha jnatum na shaknoti ityartha. Okay, so yeah, vikasam prapta pratibha, the pratibha, kavinam pratibha, the intelligence of a poet or the imagination of a poet. Yat vyapnoti, that which it covers. Yat vyapnoti tat, the expanse, tat vyaptim. Because it goes beyond the world itself. He's going to say, he's going to cover this topic in a couple of shlokas now. So how it is very different. Jagat Vilakshanam iti, he started with how in that Sadartha, Vakroktayaha Bhushanani ityatra, he showed us that this is the path Kavi is going to take to explain how a Kavya world is completely different from the regular world that we see. So Vikasam Prapta Kavinam Pratibha Yat Vyapnoti Tat Shivaha Api Na Vetti. So this Pratibha is defined Oh, I have not given the quotations. Okay, that's fine. So pratibha is actually defined as prajna navanava unmesha shalini pratibha. Pratibha is, we just call it as creativity, imagination. What is creativity? So that is nava nava. Nutanataya unmesha shalini. Nutanataya vastuna. You know, every object has its true nature. But a poet can also give it different twists, right? Newer things he can describe. Everybody, right from whatever times, even from Vedas times, have described the moon, the earth, the akasham, a woman, everything, you know. But still people keep on writing and expressing. It is because they are able to produce newer things in their perspective of the objects of the world. So that is that Nava Nava Unmesha Shalini Prajna. It is an intellect which is capable, Shali, which has the inherent quality of creating newer things or creating newer perspective. That is Prajna, Pratibha. Another, I think Abhinava Gupta gives this definition. He says, Apurva Vastu Nirmana Kshama Prajna iti Pratibha. Apurva Vastu Nirmana. It can also create a Vastu which is completely new, which has not been there before. Pravalopahitam yadi syat, moktikam yadi pravalopahitam yadi syat. Even in Subramanya Bhujangam, when Adi Shankara describes the 6 phases of Subramanya, he says they are like Purna Bimbha. Every time, without any kalankam, if there is a Purna Chandra and there are 6 of it rising at the same time, then I can probably give a comparison between Shanmukha and the moon. So he creates a situation which is probably not even existent in this world. Hence his pratibha goes beyond what is there. So he can even create something which is new. So apurva vastu nirmana kshama prajna eva pratibha ityuchyate. Here pratibha karanat ishwarasya pratibha asti, but this is just the expression of the poet Nilakanta Dikshita to say that the Kavi is much better than Ishvara. It is not a new way of expression, in the sense in Kavya Prakasham also the first shloka talks about how the Brahmanaha Srishti, Kavi Srishti, is completely different from Brahma's Srishti. In a Brahma's Srishti you have only 6 rasas. Shadrasopetameva Brahmanaha Jagat. Kintu Kavehe Jagattu Navarasopetam. There are 9 different rasas that you can enjoy. In that Shadrasam, and each one you will have to experience it in its own taste only. And if you don't like bitter, you will experience sadness. If you don't like sweet, then you will again experience sadness. But if you like something really well, you will experience. So it is mixed with both Sukham and Dukkham, whereas the Kavehe Jagat is only Sukham, Sukhamatram. He's going to explain that in the next shloka. Not in the next shloka, a couple of shlokas later. So the sadartha matra grahanat, atra pratibha is the distinguishing factor between Ishvara and Kavi. And so Ishvarate kavehe adhikya varnanam asti atra iti vyatireka alankaraha. Okay. So sadartha matra grahanat pratita sarvajnata saapi shashanka maulehe prapta vikasam pratibha kavinam Vyapnoti yadvetti natat shivoapi. Next one is Ullangya tantrantara sampradayana utprekshamana jagat anyat anyat. Kasmat bibhimaha kavayo bhavamaha. Kavyajna danda bibhimaha tu kamam. Kavayaha bhavamaha. The pride that Nilakanta Dikshita has is just very let's say infectious. The moment you even write 2 shlokas, 2 lines in a shloka and say that, then you will call yourself as a kavi here. Kavayaha bhavamaha. We are indeed poets who do not adhere to the different shastras that are present. Shastra sampradayaneva ullangya vayam jagatu utprekshamaha. We don't adhere to the traditional learning here. So tantrantara sampradayan ullangya sahitya tantrameva anusritya. So that is understood here. Tantrantaram is anyat tantram tantrantaram. So anyani tantrani shastrani athava darshanani tesham sampradayan ullangya. Tesha sampradayah guru paramparaya agataha upadeshaha ye santi. All those advices or traditional branches of learning are put together as tantrantara sampradayam here. So tantrantara sampradayaan. So because he has used the word tantrantara, anyat tantram, other shastras, we will take it as he adheres only to the Sahitya Shastram, and that is seen in the second line. So tantrantara sampradayaan ullangya after crossing over, like atikramya. We have poets having passed beyond the traditional branches of learning, tantrantara sampradayaan ullangya jagat anyat utprekshamanaha. They fancy the world, utpreksham kurvanti, udbhavayantaha santaha kavayaha katham jagat anyat. They don't think of it as just one item. For us, if you are not a kavi, you will look at the moon and say it is moon. Done. That you probably you will say, okay, it is round. Maybe a little bit more you will say it is dosa. I don't know how the kavi's mind works. But then if you look at Kolayanandam, the way he looks at the moon's kalankam, not the moon itself, but then the kalankam, ankam kepi shashankire jalanidhe pankam pare menire. Ankam jalanidhe pankam iti menire. The moon has come from the ocean. It was born from the Kshirabdhi. So probably it has taken that mud from that ocean and it has come. That mud is still present in that moon and it is that kalankam there. So nobody would imagine the world that the poet imagines is something beyond, that's why he's a poet, right? It is beyond our world, the normal world that we see. So utprekshamanaha jagati vidyamanan padarthan anyam utprekshamanaha. Say they look at each and every, they fancy the world as something very different than its true nature. Tattvam vihaya pratyekasyapi padarthasya, there is an inherent nature in that padartham. Padarthatvam vihaya, they let go of that padartham and they imagine it to be something very different. Vinna vinnataya udbhavayanti. Udbhavayantaha utprekshamanaha kavayaha. Utprekshamanaha kavayaha bhavamaha. So the anvaya goes like that. So we are poets who fancy the entire world as different, without even adhering to the traditional branches of learning. Tantrantara sampradayana ullangya utprekshamanaha. Now, don't you fear anybody? See, if you're looking at the world as completely different from what it is, then you should be afraid of something, right? Kasmat vivimaha. The pride that he has is just beautiful. So kasmat hetoho, what is the reason for us to be afraid? We don't need to, because it is all in the imagination, right? And everybody understands. So whom do we fear? Kasmat bibhimaha kavyagnya dandat bibhimaha tu kamam nischayena kintu kamam nischayena bibhimaha. Atra see, bibhimaha and bibhimaha both are there. It is an optional form you can use. It's lat lakara uttama purusha bahuvachane. You have two forms. So bibhimaha, and he has used both here. It's like a grammar learning for us. So kavyagnya dandat bibhimaha tu kamam. Yet we only fear bibhimaha dandat, from the punishment of people who are knowledgeable in kavyams. Kavyagnya dandat. Kavyam ye jananti kavyagnaha Tesham dandat. That is the dandam is they will only doshan ullikhya te vadanti. You'll have to fear being in Mammata's eyesight here. Mammata is dosha prakaranam is the famous section, which is the biggest section in his entire Kavya Prakasha. After Alankar, there are only two sections which are really huge in the text called Kavya Prakasham, which is a study on different kavyas. Even Kalidasa was not left alone. Kalidasa has been put there in Dosha Prakaranam also. So that is the only thing that he fears. So Kavyajnaihi doshan ullikya dandam diyate ityeva tatra bhayam vartate na kinchit anyat. They don't fear about anybody else. It's only the people who are alankarika and who are knowledgeable in the study of kavyas. They might talk of some dosham or the other. Even beautiful shlokams, he would say some dosham or the other. The worst is the most beautiful shlokam, which has so much of dhvani, yet he will take up some small thing. There is one shloka in Hanuman Natakam, which is a very wonderful shloka about how Ravana, all of his kulam, everything is after Kumbhakarna's death, he is saying about how he feels it is such an insult to his strength that Rama has come to Lanka. Nyakkaro hyayameva me yadaraya. The very fact that I have enemies itself is a nyakkara. Nyakkara is something that is Tamil solrona ilukkumbo. It's an insult to me. So the fact that I have enemies itself is a problem for me, is an insult to me. And tatrapyasau tapasaha. He is just ashramavasi, sannyasi. Jatamudi, he's wearing Jatadharaha saha, sanna atra agataha. Tattu atreva nihanti rakshasakulam. He comes to Lanka and kills so many people, not just one, but the entire race of Rakshasas, Rakshasakulam. Jivatyaho Ravanaha. After seeing all of this, I'm still alive. It's even a very sad thing. In fact, he feels it's an insult to his Veeram. Right? What is the point of getting so much of biceps and everything? So, Vritha uchu Sarga gramatika viluntana vrithochunaihi kim evir bhujaihi. Swarga, I had treated this entire Swarga as a gramam, and my exercise was to repeatedly go and do war with them, with the devas. So tatha tabihi tadrishaihi bhujaihi kim prayojanam iti vadati. But here, such a beautiful shloka. But then Mammata will find some dosha there. Mammata is dosha ikadrik. He'll say this is videya vimarsha dosham, that dosha, this dosha, this word should not be in the beginning. It should be ayam nyakkaraha, natu nyakkaro hyayam ityadikam. So Nilakanta Dikshita fears only such people. Kavyajna dandat vibhimaha. Kavyam ye jananti. They dandam, they will probably give me some sort of a punishment. Not a punishment in direct punishment, but in their works, they will just write. Right? So ullangya tantrantara sampradayana utprekshamanaha jagat anyat tantrantara sampradayana ullangya. After passing beyond atikramya, traditional branches of learning, jagat anyat utprekshamanaha kavayaha bhavama. We are poets who fancy the world as something very, very different from what it is in its essential nature. Whom do we fear? Kasmat bibhimaha. Vayantu kevalam athava kamam nischayena iti vaktum shakyate. So definitely we are afraid of bibhimaha kavyajna dandat. Atra bhitrarthanam panchami. So whichever is the source of fear should be in panchami. And so he says kavyajna dandat bibhimaha. We fear from that the punishment that alankarika can give. Okay. The next one is Tantrant, the trend of this showing that it is very different from normal Tantram, So in Jagat, there are many Shastras which talk about how the Jagat is. Darshanas have come to tell you about the different Padarthas in the world and how you can go beyond these Padarthas and find moksha, or whether these Padarthas in fact give you Sukham or not. So every Darshanam only talks about the essential nature of a Padartha and describes a Padartha as it is. Describes an object as it is present. Whereas Kavyasya tu Jagat Vailakshanyam. Atra Kevalam Dridahati, he just strengthens his position that this Kavyam is completely different from the world. And the Shastras which describe the world. Tantrantareshu Pratipadyamanaha te te padarthaha nanu te te eva nirveda bhi shoka jugupsitani api ayanti sahitya pathe rasatvam. Tantrantareshu, anyeshu tantreshu, anyeshu shastreshu, darshaneshu, pratipadyamanaha varnyamanaha, or those objects which are expounded, which are described in other tantras, te te padarthaha, te te ityukte pratyakshena anubhuyamanaha ye vishayaha santi, te te padarthaha ye varnyamanaha vidyanti. Those objects that are being described in the Shastras are definitely themselves. That's all. Nanu tete eva. Tete ityukte tattad vastu tattvebhyaha anapetaha eva santite. They are not any different from what is there. No Shastra, no Darshanam describes an object as something beyond what it is. Utpreksha eva nasti tatra. So then they are not kavis there, right? It is a shastram. It describes what is present. That's it. So tantreshu, tantrantareshu, shastreshu, anyeshu shastreshu, sahityam vihaya. So everywhere, if there is an tantrantara athava anyat tantram iti yatra yatra uktam, tatra sarvatra, you take it as sahitya shastram vihaya. And then he will show the difference in Sahitya Shastra. So, Tantrantareshu, in other Shastras, Pratipadyamanaha te te padarthaha, those different objects which are explained, which are described, Pratipadyamanaha, nanu, indeed, nischayena, te te eva. This second one, so the first te te and the second te te should be taken as very different here. Even though he has repeated, it is not a punarukti dosha here. Okay. Always, not always, generally, if it is a subkavi, you will have to take it as different. You don't take it as the same word itself. It means something different. So, arthantare sankramitam. It goes and implies another meaning. Te te padarthaha. The first te te padarthaha, you will take it as pratyakshena drishtaha padarthaha. The objects that are seen right in front of the eyes, either seen or perceived, either by any pratyaksha pramanena. All five sense organs can feel the objects in the world. So te te padarthaha, you will take it as pratyakshena anubhuyamanaha padarthaha. The next one, te te eva. Te te ityukte taddad vastu vishayebhyaha vastu tattvebhyaha na chalanti. Vastu tattvam eva. Vastu tattvam sikrite eva vartante asmin jagati. Okay. Nirveda bhi shoka jugupsitani sahitya pathe rasatvam ayanti. There are many undesired feelings in the world. Right? We go to Kavyam or Shastram, anything, any person, the first thing they will want is, if you ask any person in the world, what do you want? They'll say, I want to be happy, hopefully. There are people who also say, I want more money, I want 10 million, whatever. So, if you ask a person, the first thing they will say is, why are you wanting money? Even then, the ultimate goal would be to attain Sukham and happiness, right? Ananda, that is their ultimate goal. Correct? But in the world, we rarely find people experiencing that happiness. There are so many undesired feelings that are there in the world. right? There is a feeling of failure, nirvedaha. Bhihi, there is a feeling of fear, bhayam. Shokaha, grief. Jugupsitam, disgust. These are all feelings in the world. The result is not something that is ishtam, it is anishtam. Anishta bhavaha yete. Nobody wants to always feel disgust every day. Right? Nobody wants to live in fear. Nobody wants to live in grief or constantly have the feeling of failure in life or swa avamananam. These are all kinds of feelings that are anishtam in the normal world. But in Sahityam, Sahitya Pathe, in the Margam, Sahityasya Pathi Marge, these undesired feelings, Nirvedaha, Bhihi, Shokaha, Jugupsitam. Nirveda is a feeling of Nishpalatvam. Okay, I will explain all these feelings shortly after I finish the shloka. So, Sahitya Pathe, these feelings in the margam, in the path of sahitya, path of literature, even the feelings of despair, fear, sorrow, disgust, all of these attain ayanti rasatvam, attain the status of being a rasa. Now, these four feelings, say there are navarasas in our literature, right? So, Shringara, Hasya, Karuna, Veera, Raudra, Bhayanaka, Adbhuta, Shanta. I hope I mentioned everything. Yeah. So there are 9 rasas. In this Shringaram, yes, love sentiment. Everybody wants to feel love sentiment. Okay. You, in some way or the other. There is also the Vatsalyam there. There are many types of feelings that you feel. Hasa, definitely. These are all desired feelings in the world. In Sahityam also, it is very easy to understand that this can produce happiness or this can produce a rasatvam. This can become a rasatvam. Right? So initially, when I spoke about vibhava, anubhava, vyabhichari bhava, and sthayi bhava, which becomes rasa, right? So now these feelings that we have, it comes about because a scene is present in front of us. There is a person who evokes certain feelings in you, or there can be an object in the world that evokes that type of a feeling in you, right? And then slowly you in the world, it just remains as that feeling. That is the sthayi bhava, right? You witness an accident, you feel grief, that grief, shokaha, remains as sthayi bhava in the world. Now, when you translate it into the kavyam, you start enjoying it. Even the feeling, you go to a movie or a drama or read a book, which is really filled with sorrow, but you come out of it and you say, I enjoyed the movie. You might have just cried the whole movie, but then you come out of it and say, I enjoyed it. So an undesired feeling in the world becomes an enjoyment in the kavya world. Right? So these feelings are called sthayi bhava, which are present in the mind. We must have experienced it at some point, and they become udbhutam. Ete sthayi bhavaha tu udbhutaha bhavanti tadanantaram. And when you experience that joy at the end, the culmination becomes a feeling. Yes, it is not reality. That is why we are able to enjoy it. But even if it is not reality, still, exactly why we enjoy it, right? So the Nirveda, I will just define these qualities called Nirveda, Bhaya, and Shoka. These definitions are present in mostly all Alankara Shastras. I have just taken from Prataparudriyam because the Prataparudriyam he gives definitions very cleanly. The examples are all about who is that Prataparudra, who is a Kakatiya Raja, but the definitions that he gives, it is the first text that every person should read to understand the definitions, because the definitions are very, very clear. So Nirvedaha is both a Vyabhichari Bhava and a Sthayi Bhava. It is a Sthayi Bhava for Shantarasa, and it can be a Vyabhichari Bhava for other rasas. So Dukkha, Irshya, Tattvabodhadehe, Nishpalatvadihi, Nirvedaha. Dukkha, some grief can cause a failure, nishphalatvam, it can cause an idea of, something is gone, or how to say, the idea of futility that comes from dukkha, sorrow, or from jealousy. You see someone who is really intelligent, and then you say, oh, I can never be someone like that. Tata nishpalatvadihi. Then it can also come from tattvabodha. Tattvabodham, when it comes from tattvabodha, it becomes, if this dukkha and irshya leads to, let's say, a desire for moksham, then it becomes a sthayi bhava for shantarasa. The next one is bhayam. Bhayam is something that fear, you say it is fear, but what do you actually fear? See, these definitions actually give you, it also gives a, how to say this, it tells you how to look at your own fears. See, Raudra Sandarshanadibihi, Anartha Ashankanam Bhayam. Anartha Ashankanam, you expect some bad result, anartham, untoward results. When you see some Raudram object, Raudra is a ferocious object. When you see some ferocious objects, or some other, you hear about somebody else coming in or something like that, and it immediately gives the feeling of, okay, something is not going to happen well. That is that fear that you have. So when you are able to understand the object that gives you that fear, you can tackle with your inner fears also. Right? So that is bhayam. Ishtajana viyogadina atmani dukkha atibhumihi shokaha. Ishtajana viyogaha. The shoka is the feeling that Arjuna feels when he thinks that all his grandfather and everybody are going to die. Right? So ishtajana viyogaha. The separation, permanent separation. When you think about the permanent separation of someone you like, then that dukkha atibhumihi, the excessive sorrow that is generated in oneself, atmani, sayeva shokaha iti uktaha. Jugupsa arthanam dosha sandarshanam. Jugupsa is you feel garhana is not, you feel sorry or disgust. You feel disgusted when the faults of an object is pointed out. See, the faults, if the faults are magnified about the object, then you feel a disgust towards it, right? Even this can become a rasa, and that rasa is called bibhatsam. Malati Madhavam is a 10-act play written by Bhavabhuti, which is based on Bibhatsa Rasa. The Angi Rasam, the Pradhana Rasam there is Bibhatsa. So Tantrantareshu Pratipadyamanaha te padartaha nanu te eva. In the world, everything just stays as that object itself, and it does not change, go beyond its Vastu-tattvam, its essential nature. Whereas here, Nirveda bhi shoka jugupsitani api, even undesired feelings, anishta bhavaha ye santi, te api rasatvam ayanti sahitya pathe. In the world of literature, they are treated as rasa. Okay. Now the next one is arthavabodhepi, arthavabodhepi same rasajnaihi anvishyate satkavi suktireva apatyalabhepi same vidagdhaha rupottarameva hi rochayante. True that different types of rasas are felt, and you feel happiness from a poetry, but will every poetry give you that? No, it's only certain satkavinam uktihi eva is capable of giving that rasa. So Satkavi Suktim Prashamsati. So he starts praising the works. So here the next set of few shlokas, maybe even 20-25 shlokas, I think around 20 shlokas, he describes a good kavi, how the words of a good kavi should be. And then he goes on to Dushkavi descriptions. Okay. So Artha Avabodhe Same Api. When the I have given a different, I have not given the Anvaya for this. Okay. I written the Anvaya. I think the Anvaya is fairly simple for this. Okay, 1 minute. Let me just do that. Arthavabodhe same api rasajnaihi satkavisuktih eva anvishyate. Arthavabodhe. Avabodhaha nama something that is understood. So what he tries to say here is Loke bahuni kavyani likhitani santi. There have been many poetries. There are being kavyas being written also, and I'm sure there will be people who come about later also who will write many poetries, right? Write many kavyam. But among those who write, how will you identify whether it is Satkavi or Dushkavi? How will you identify is one thing. He has given us a lot of techniques to identify or differentiate between a good poet and a bad poet. Now, all of them want to explain some meaning or the other, right? They want to express a meaning, artha avabodaha. They want to illuminate some meaning or the other. Whether it is a good kavi or a bad kavi, Swiya kavyena artham udbodhya anyana avagamayitum eva yatnam kurvanti. Their effort is to make other people understand some meaning or the other, and they illuminate that meaning. So, artha avabodhe same api, same satyapi, tulye satyapi. Even though the process of illumination of meaning is equal to both a bad kavi and a good kavi, Rasajnaihi satkavisuktihi eva anvishyate. Rasajnaihi sahridayaihi. Ye rasam jananti taihi sahridayaihi kavyatmajnaihi satkavisuktihi. Satkavi, sankavihi. San is good. Good poets suktihi. Uttama kavehe vakeva athava kavehe uttama vakeva. Oh, you can take it like that also. Kavehe Kavehe suktihi kavi suktihi. Sati kavi suktihi sat kavi suktihi. You can take it as sat can be an adjective to sukti, or it can be an adjective to the kavi also. He may be a good poet, but but you don't need to take everything that he says also. Only if it is something beneficial to you, then you take that. Not something which is not beneficial, right? In Ramayana, Ravana has also been described. Rama has also been described. If someone reads the entire Ramayana and says, I want to be the most powerful person like Ravana, but then you should also understand that there will be a Rama to, establish good in the world, right? So, Saddu uktim eva tatra griniyaditi. So, arthavabodhe same api, even though the bringing out of the meaning is equal in both a bad kavi and a good kavi, rasajnaihi satkavisuktihi eva anvishyate. Only the sayings of a good poet or the good sayings of a poet are being searched by rasajnyaha, sahridayaha. You can say people who know who study the Shastras. The same way, there is no Eva in this Shloka. There is a discussion of Alankara in this Shloka. So, apatyalabhe same api vidagdhaha rupottarameva hi rochayante. Vidagdhaha. Scholars, even though all children are the same, apatyalabhe same api, even if the attainment of an offspring, a child, is the same, whether it is a boy or a girl or a good-looking handsome boy or a beautiful girl or somebody who doesn't look so handsome, anyway, it doesn't matter. But rupottaram eva rochayante. Rupam, not only outside form. Rupottara is rupena adhikam. Rupam can mean atishaya rupavati, who is extremely beautiful or superior in form, or you can also take it as swarupena uttaram, someone who is essentially much more good, much more beautiful. Naturally, the panditaha, vidagdhaha, an intelligent person, will be attracted, or rochayante, will be pleased by the person who has a superior form. So, rupottaram eva rochayante atmanaha vishaye. So, they like only those people see, ruchi dhatu usually is rochate. Here it is being used in nijanta to say, so vidagdhaihi rupottara rochate. Here you will take it as vidagdaha rupottaram rochayante. This is actually in kartari prayogam only, but it is a niche form, causal form. Apatyalabhe same api, even though the getting of a child is the same for everybody, but scholars think that the one with the superior form is they are attracted towards, they search for only a person who is more or they accept a person who is more superior in form. Here it is a very simple shloka, but the alankara here is prativastupama alankara. It is a type of alankara where there is a comparison. There is an upamana vakyam and an upameya vakya. The first one is the upameya vakyam, where it is the prakritam artha avabodhe same api rasajnaihi satkavi suktihi anvishyate ityatra upameya vakyam vartate. Dvitiyantu atra upamana vakyam. This is your upamana, where the standard of comparison, it is being compared here. In prativastupama, the difference between prativastupama and another alankara called drishtanta, where it is bimba pratibimba bhavaha, the main difference is there should be a samanya dharma. The samanya dharma should be common to both the upamanam and the upameyam in prativastupama, whereas in drishtanta the sadharana dharma should be different. Tvameva kirtiman rajan vidhureva kantiman. Rajan, hey king, oh king, you are famous, just as how the moon is lustrous, has a kanti. So luster is the dharma in the moon and kirti is the dharma in the king. These two are two different sadharana dharma. Here also it seems like it is different. Anvishyate is the sadharana dharma in the first vakyam, and in the second vakyam rochayante is the sadharana dharma. But both actually, the ultimate meaning of it is only anvishyate, or not anvishyate, ichha. Ichanti anvishyate ityukte kimartham rasajnyaha anvishyanti. They want to search for a good kavyam because they like good kavyams. So tatra anvishyate iti padamapi tatra ichha rupena eva upayujyate iti karanat tatra samanya dharmaha ichha rupaha eva. So we take it as prativastupama because the lakshanam of it is vakyayoho ekasamanye prativastupama mata. Any questions you can ask now? You can raise your hand and I will unmute you. Just let me know if you have any questions. No, we'll stop with this. Okay, no questions? First time. Okay, I think we'll stop with yes, sir. You can unmute yourself now. Arun Kumar, sir, I think you can unmute yourself.
You said happening of anartham creates some kind of fear in the mind. Are there any definition for the anartham? What do they mean by anartham?
அது இருக்கு, நிறைய இருக்கு. Anartham is anything that is see, if you look at a raud like a veera, he might kill you. Illa there could be a possibility that there is a separation from your family. என்னெல்லாமோ இருக்கு. It depends. It's very subjective.
இல்ல பயம்ங்கிறதுக்கு ஒரே ஒரு காரணம், எனி லிவிங் ஆர்கானிசம் இஸ் டெத். அதை தவிர பயம் வர்றதுக்கு எந்த காரணமுமே இல்லை. அதை தவிர வேற ஏதாவது காரணம் சாஸ்திரத்துல வேற எங்க சொல்லப்பட்டிருக்காங்க?
கண்டிப்பா இருக்கு சார். ஒவ்வொருத்தர் இட் டிபெண்ட்ஸ் ஆன் ஈச் பர்சன். இப்ப எனக்கு வந்து இந்த
ஃபில்டர் பண்ணிக்கிட்டே போனீங்கன்னா அந்த டெத்ல தான்.
ஃபில்டரிங் இஸ் ஆல்சோ இன் தி மைண்ட், ரைட்? அதுக்காக சொல்றேன். see, ஃபில்டரிங்ங்கிறது some people are capable.
ஏன் வருதுன்னா ரிப்பீட்டடா அவன் பிறந்து வாழ்ந்து இறந்து ரிப்பீட்டடா வரான். எந்த ஜென்மம் எடுத்தாலும் அவன் இறக்கணும், திரும்ப பிறக்கணும். இறக்கிறதுக்கு முன்னாடி அவன் பல துன்பங்களை சந்திக்கிறான். அது எல்லாமே மெமரியில் அப்படியே வந்துட்டு இருக்கு. அதுதான் பயத்துக்கு காரணம்னு சொல்றாங்க. இதை தவிர வேற ஏதாவது காரணம் இருக்குன்னு சாஸ்திரம் சொல்லுதாங்க.
So that is a very philosophical way of looking at bhaya, shoka moha bhayam, correct? See, that is the ultimate kind of this thing. Enna solradhu, everybody is not of that frequency to understand that the final bhayam or dukkham is janma punarjanma iti chakram. Adu vandu not everybody can understand it to that level. Still people feel, you know, ava adipa enakku pain varum adukku bhayapadva, you know, adukku irkalam illa oru erumbu poகிறது. See, certain fears cannot even be explained by certain people. And erumbுங்கிறது வந்து you feel
சத்குரு என்ன சொல்றாருன்னா வலி அப்படிங்கறதே மெமரி, it comes from our past life only.
Correct. Still அதுதான் சொல்றேன், it is a very philosophical way of looking at it and not a laukika way of looking at the different types of fears that each person. Kavyamங்கிறச்சு, see, you are trying to explain everything that a person feels normally, correct? வெறும் பிலாசபியை மாத்திரம் நம்ம எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ணிட்டே இருந்தோம்னா then it becomes, அதுல இருந்து வந்து அதுக்கு எப்படி போகிறது மனுஷாலால? You know, all people cannot take to philosophy very easily. It's a very difficult process, sir. It's not everyday man's food. Yeah, so you'll have to take them away from the local worldly fears slowly, one by one, and tell them that the ultimate fear is this cycle. Adudha, you'll have to try to not put it into samskaras, you'll have to get it into abhyasa. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes, sir. Ganesh Mahoday.
Yes. Atra रोचयन्ते रूपोत्तरां रोचयन्ते इति उक्तम्. अत्र रूपोत्तराम् इति स्त्रीलिङ्गे अस्ति. तस्य कः अर्थः अत्र? स्त्रीलिङ्गे तु साधारणतया न उच्यते.
न स्त्रीलिङ्गे सत्यम् अपत्यम् इति पूर्वम् उपयुज्यते, तत्र नपुंसकलिङ्गे उपयुज्यते. तदनन्तरं रूपोत्तराम् इति उच्यते चेत्, I think the best example would be from Kumarasambhava, where he says, you know, bahuni apatyani santi api tasyameva tasya abhiruchihi syat iti vadati Kumarasambhave. You know, even though Himavat Parvata has a lot of apatyam iti tatra napunsakalinke upayujya, tadanantaram Parvatim nirdeshtum he uses strilinga there. So here it is, he says, you know, if she only a girl who has a more beautiful form. So atishaya roopavati chet tatra samudrika lakshana ritya prayah roopanugunameva gunaha iti you know, to suchayitum atra he tries to say that probably, but I won't consider it too much.
Is he partial towards girls than boys?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think it's also, you'll have to take it as within the framework of a 16th century, 17th century work. Yeah. So I think that would be better. Paramarsha, there is a question here. Paramarshaha swikaraniyaha eva va kavibihi kada paramarshaha kada tiraskaraniyaha. Paramarshaha ityukte, I am unable to understand. Can you unmute yourself and ask? Shankari Mohdaya. If you raise your hand, I can unmute. Paramarshaha, what is your what are you asking? Namaste.
Paramarshaha अत्र अहं विमर्श भवती उक्तवती किल अन्य कविज्ञः एवम् अहं इति ते किं वदन्ति इत्येव मम भयम् अस्ति इति.
ओके, काव्यज्ञ दण्डात् विभिमः. ओके.
एवं ते दोषं वदन्ति इति भयेन एव करणीयं वा इति. तत्र
आम्, सत्यम्।
सारांशः अस्ति वा तेषां दोषकथने सारांशः अस्ति वा इति द्रष्टव्यः वा, नो चेत् केनापि दोषः एव न निर्देष्टव्यः इति विचिन्त्य करणीयं वा?
दोषः न, illa, I'm still a little confused about what you're asking.
न मम प्रश्नः एषः, दोषः तु एकस्य दृष्ट्या कदाचित् भवत्येव खलु, सर्वे
न तत्र ओके ओके, दोषः एव न भवितव्यः इति, ओके, सी, dosha or mistakes is not only in the perspective. So you are not looking at it from, you're not in the world here, you're in the kavya world. For the kavya world there are rules. He also gives rules where he says doshaha api gunapakshe kada bhavanti ityapi saha dosha prakarane vadati. In cases like where, you know, punarukti dosha can be there, where they are repeatedly saying the same idea, but if it is in shokam, it is a guna. If it is in shringara, it is doshaha. Tadha, he gives leeway for that. There is it is not perspective dosha. It's not a mistake only in certain perspectives. It is a commonly accepted thing that there are certain rules on how to write a kavyam, how to bring out the rasa, and vyakarana shuddhistu tatra bhavatyeva. You know, you have the adhering to the rules of grammar is the basis for it. So this is not a perspective as such, you know, only in the perspective of alankarikas.
नियम अनुसृत्य काव्य
कर्तव्यम्.
अस्तु अस्तु महोदय, धन्यवादः.
No problem. Any other questions? Raman sir? Yes.
I just thought of this Shankara's Shloka, Guruvashtakam, where he uses tatakyam, 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 tatakyam. 4 times he says.
Yeah, 4 times if he repeats, I think every time you'll have to take a different meaning. Stotras don't come in this category. That is a stotram. Yeah. Generally in stotras, it is given that you can repeat because it is an outpouring of you know, the bhavam, vatsalyam, rati. Yeah. So it's okay, no problem.
And from the standpoint, the word fear was
anartha shankara
as an acronym, and he said, one of my American friends said, fear is false entity appearing real, or something like that. Anyway,
that is the philosophical this thing, false entity appearing real. It's the philosophical this thing of fear.
Yeah. And Taittiriya Upanishad says, when there are the moment a second thing is coming to view, then there is fear.
Definitely.
Yeah. But Kavi is totally different. He jumps into a different domain. And
definitely.
He is free to do what he wants.
Yes. Raj Lakshmi Mate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste.
The Rasikas search good kavyams and they get that Kavi's Sukti, okay? Then they basically, you know, any connection. As a result of the search, they find something Rupottare, Andamariya.
It's just a comparison between the first line and the second line.
Okay.
So just as how, you know, rasagnya, அதாவது காவியம் தெரிஞ்சவர்கள் எப்படி வந்து நல்ல கவியினுடைய சூக்தியை தேடுறாளோ அந்த மாதிரி எத்தனை குழந்தைகள் இருந்தாலும் அழகா இருக்கிற ஒரு குழந்தைய தான் வந்து தேடுவா. தமிழ் சுலபம்ல, சட்டுன்னு புரிஞ்சிரும். ஓகே, right. Namaste. I think enough questions over nanikren. Okay, right. We'll see next week. Thank you.